This was one of the first moments I knew this game was something special. Even the menu was vying for my attention. Games have so much more space for creativity to shine through than many other mediums. Movies are an excellent example of this. Start to finish, the product you receive is the experience that the creator intended. How each viewer experiences it is of course different, but the product is the same. Because of this, many movies understand how important the first 10 minutes are. There are a lot of questions from the viewer that are typically asked in these first few minutes. The best movies answer only the most base level of ones and leave the biggest questions for the viewer's imagination. Games are a little different. Most of the time, the first 10 minutes with a game aren't even spent playing it. Seriously though, the first 10 minutes of a game, once you launch it, are often spent in menus, watching cutscenes, or being told how to press a button. Now, unless you downloaded EVE Online, this isn't really what you're looking for. You want gameplay, you want fun. That is the reason you have picked up the game and want to play it. We will call this idea player perception, as this is a more broad, overarching idea that we will apply to the game as a whole. So frequently, we sacrifice player perception for accessibility. Any game that has an overt tutorial section, in my eyes, lacks an understanding of how players view the game. The developers see it as an instruction manual. Most of the time, nothing interesting happens, or if it does, it only happens as a vessel to get the player character from training to a situation that could have been the actual start of the game. Tutorials are not always bad though. Look at games like Titanfall 2, where you as a player are lined up with the character. The character is a pilot in training, and you get shown the mechanics in a way that also teaches you about how the world works. It feels natural. You aren't reading text menus. There's a character in the world who is talking you through things you should be aware of. There is a time trial where you can see how well you do and put the things you have learned to the test. After revisiting the game for another story playthrough, I found myself really loving the time trial as I could feel the difference in my own abilities from when I was playing the first time through the story. These are game devs who spent the time to make even a basic tutorial part of the fun. They understand how important it is to the player's perception of the game. So as someone who loathes most tutorials because I know how to hit buttons, this sequence on starting Hades sucked me in immediately. It's like a breath of fresh air. It didn't even dawn on me until I was going to record footage for the backing of my initial video about this game that I realized what I really wanted to talk about. This game understands on a core level what the player experience is all about and how player perception is a huge part of the enjoyment. You can have good mechanics, but if the surrounding player experience in the first couple of hours is bad, you might lose players before they ever see the fun of the game as it opens up. You can have amazing music, but if the tutorials and early game experience is so unfun, people may never hear the wonderful compositions that accompany the mini levels and characters. You can have amazing art, but if the story and mechanics are lacking, the art does not have a way to really flex its muscles and show the player the incredible world. Hades recognizes that first and foremost, it is a game, and that every part of the game is important to the overall player perception. You don't go into some menu to power up, you go to the mirror in your room. You don't just plop down a bonus structure just because they give you stat upgrades. You commission work to happen in the domain from the contractors. It has a real and tangible feel of adding to the world. These are the most basic part of the mechanics of the game, and even these are woven into the world itself instead of tucked in a menu under the character tab like so many other games. There are more examples of this as well, and as I played, I began to find that the game's roguelike mechanics are interwoven into the story in a way I have not seen any game truly embrace like this. I won't go into them because some of the charm of this game is seeing how much it truly understands it is a game at its core level. Instead of shrouding it, it embraces it and uses the things a player expects to really pull you in. Okay, we are teetering close to spoilers that I am dying to talk about. So if you don't want to see this, please stop now. Know that I adore this game, and you would do yourself a huge service to go pick it up, play it until you get your first ending, then come back and watch this part. Or click the timestamp on the screen. This is not some huge deal, but I really think you should experience it for yourself. It truly is something special. Okay, are they gone? Great. Let's keep going. So as you push further and further, unlocking more and more perks and such to get you further into the game, you will see more and more that characters comment on what you're doing, on what boons you have, what things you have accomplished, but not in a way that feels game-like. Hades himself comments on how you keep the weapons that are supposed to be locked up out near the portal for your own use. Characters treat you differently as you progress their friendships, both in the world and in the house. It makes the world feel alive, without any sort of elaborate systems to give the illusion that it's alive. The characters just feel godlike instead of people with superpowers, which is one of the reasons why Zagreus is such a compelling character. I think I did something like 30 escape attempts before I finally beat Hades. Considering how hard it was just to make it to this point, let alone cross that final threshold, I was elated. Zagreus finally gets to meet Persephone, but then, as this reunion is occurring, it becomes painfully obvious something's wrong with Zag. Then, with his final goal standing in front of him, he dies. All this work, all the fighting and pushing, well, it didn't even matter. He just died anyways, just like every other time. I don't often get emotional with video games, but I just sat there with a deep sadness in my heart I've never felt in a game. My heart mirrored how crushed Zag was by such a monumental victory, being obstructed by such an immovable roadblock right at its apex. As I walked out of the pool of blood I had become intimately familiar with in all of those deaths, I felt something else stir inside of me. Determination. One that mirrored Zag's own emotions. If I could do it once, I could do it so many more times if it meant helping him. At this point I had to step back. I had felt the emotions that Zagreus had. His words were more than that at this point to me, as I had been there with him in his struggles. His character believably acted and reacted to the world and happenings around him. I had grown attached to him. I was a big fan of the way Meg had changed her tone with me by shoving contraband at her. I adored the way Nyx's character had progressed. Cerberus being the goodest of boys was also a highlight. Even Hades was a character I was beginning to see in a different light, but more from my own ideas as to what was going to happen than from his own actions. And do you know why I was able to feel all this so viscerally? It is because my actions as a player had mirrored Zag's. His journey started when mine did. I was with him the first time he left. My failure was his failure. My victory was his. And in my eyes, the biggest part of that was that no part of the gameplay I had enjoyed was done in menus that were disconnected from the world. It all felt like it belonged there. So why is this important? Plenty of games get you to care about the characters you inhabit over the course of the story. Plenty of games have fun mechanics that push you through the story and the world. I think Hades is important because it takes its creativity and passion and places them in each and every facet of its being. Each menu, each location, each dialogue, it all feels so full of love and care. Even the starting screen has a very certain appeal to me now. At this point, I have approximately 60 hours in it, and every time I open that menu screen, it feels like I'm standing on the edge of a diving board, ready to jump in. When I open it, I feel the disconnect from the world around me, and absolutely love how quickly I can be sucked into this amazing world that Supergiant Games have created. It is no small feat for me. I have so much trouble getting into games simply because I feel like there is somewhat of a lost art to the start of video games. I'm usually bored, and I play games to have fun, not drool on myself. I like experiencing games blindly. I like opening a new game like a pack of collector cards, hopeful and ready. And so frequently I feel like I have to slog through 30 minutes of unfun, uninteresting stuff, whether that be exposition, tutorials, the slow start that minigames have, or simply wondering why the hell I'm supposed to care about these characters enough to want to move on. Hades lacks all of that. In the span of the first 5 minutes, you will already have started your first run and pushed through multiple rooms. You will see what this game has to offer at a base level with none of the bells and whistles that get added as you go along. And you know what? That core gameplay is so good and so clean it stands on its own anyways. I became compelled to learn about the world and the incredible characters in it because of the beautiful styles of the portraits, the incredible voice work, and the absolute brutality of the combat. The fun that came with it all was just icing on the wonderful sandwich that was my first run. I went to their website while writing this and I feel compelled to talk about Supergiant Games, or more so, a tagline on their site. Right on their homepage is what I can only assume is their mission statement. We want to make games that spark your imagination like the games you played as a kid. And boy, did they do that. After my first run, my mind went crazy. I just had to know, I had to see, I had to learn. I can't think of many other games that have ever done that to me. Even if they have, they pale in comparison to just how much I was drawn into this world. Now this next bit will probably seem pretty odd coming from someone who's played so many games, but I have trouble with the games as art designation. Mostly when it comes to walking simulators or the like. There are good ones, don't get me wrong, but I don't think those are necessarily games. I feel they're more so interactive movies. When I think of games as art, the games that come to mind are ones like Hades and Nier Automata. These are games that you simply could not experience in another medium. The impact of the third ending in Nier would simply not be possible in any other medium. The death and rebirth cycle of Hades would not be possible as a show or movie where you have a clear beginning, middle, and end. So let's get back to player perception. Why is this so important then? Video games are an experience. An amazing example of this is Breath of the Wild. This is one hell of a game. And you know what? I didn't enjoy it or finish it. It wasn't the sort of game that spoke to me. It was not the experience I look for in my Legend of Zelda titles, but I still look fondly on my time with it and recognize it as a masterpiece of a game simply because it understands that video games don't need to be structured. They don't need to constantly push you to something. Sometimes it's all about the journey. Unfortunately for me, that's not what I enjoy. But that's okay. Breath of the Wild understands what it wants to be and completely all-ins on that. It has created a player experience that revolves around freedom. If you objectively compare Hades and Breath of the Wild, you will find that so many of their core mechanics fall on the opposite end of extremes from one another. Does that make one objectively better than the other? Absolutely not. Hades understands the strengths of its mechanics and embraces them, pushing them to the forefront and intertwining the story with them. It takes its understanding of how a player will view the world, and instead of trying to separate the game from the story, it makes it a core part of the experience. And this sort of thinking absolutely elevates a player's experience from good to amazing, as there is nothing to take them out of the world they are experiencing. Alright, I feel like I'm running out of ways to say Hades is amazing without spoiling more of the story, so I think it's time to wrap things up. Hades at its core is an incredibly solid hack and slash roguelike, but the sum of its parts are so much more than a genre of a game. I think Hades is one of the best examples of just what video games can be. Each part of it could be considered art by itself, but as a whole, it is an incredible product that Supergiant Games should be more than proud of. I know I have to go back and play their other games now. They have shown that they deserve to stand up with some of the greats in terms of things you can do with the medium that is gaming. I know Hades is easily one of the top games I have ever played, and I don't say that lightly. I have played an absolute ton of games, and so very few have opened my eyes to just how much potential games have as a medium. Thanks for watching. If you made it here, you better like and subscribe. I love talking about games on a meta level, discussing what makes games fun or have staying power. Is there something or some game you would like me to talk about? Put it in the comments, or drop on my Twitch sometime. I would love to talk about them. Have a great day, dudes.